This movie has two very separate arcs going on at the same time. And at the end, they come together. But in the middle, they're kind of back and forth. And they interact some, but for the most part, they're very separate. Which one would you say is the A plot, the primary plot, and which would you say is the B plot?
That depends on whether or not I believe it to be actually happening or not.
Which that's a whole nother point, right?
It changes entirely how I would view it, because I see all angles. It's just there's a lot of merit to both sides of it being real and it not being real. Because if you look at it one way, if the fantasy aspect is real, then both plots, I'd say the fantasy plot is the A plot, only because we're clearly following the storybook. That's what started it. And this other side thing, part of the plot is keeping them separate.
Well, and that's
Ophelia's not trying to have them like merge because she's trying to not get caught. So that means there's an intent to keep both plots as separate as possible, where possible. Okay, so now we know there's already two plots. Yeah. If one is real and one isn't, if the fantasy one isn't real, can it truly be like differentiated between the two plots? Because then it's just she's having some sort of escapist illusion to cope with the horrible reality she lives in, which is what the other plot would be dealing with. Or that's actually happening, and she's trying to become the princess by doing all these tasks while also dodging plot B, interceding and intersecting with that and potentially stopping that from happening. Which one do I think is the A plot? I think if the fantasy is real, fantasy is the A plot. If it isn't, then the Civil War plot, the only plot would be the real plot.
Okay. Yeah, I guess if you look at it as simply non-existent as a coping mechanism.
Yeah, but I mean, you could still look at it narratively as there's still a plot going where she's doing this, but then that, I think, in a sense, kind of deludes whether or not it's the main plot.
It's interesting to take that perspective, because I didn't really think about it, and this is where maybe a fault on my part, but...
It always is. I'm kidding.
Oh, okay, yeah. I say that to other people all the time, so that's a fair shot. Gosh, now I forget my point. No. So it opens, like you said, with the fawn describing this fantasy world, more or less, and that's the setting that gives you what you have.
It gives you one plot line technically unrelated to the other one. The only linking thing is Princess Moana and Ofelia.
Right. And so there's two things about the existence of it or the non-existence of it that draw that into question, I guess. And the one that clearly comes to mind is when I forget who walks into the room, but there's a moment, I believe, in the movie where someone walks into the room and Ophelia's talking to the fawn, but they don't see the fawn. I'm trying to remember exactly when that was. I know it was later in the film, but there was a sense in which something she could see was something they could not see.
Was this before or after the funny little eye guy?
I believe it was after. I believe it might have been right after the mother dies. Now I'm questioning my own memory. But so anyways, there are moments where they have this indication that there's things that Ophelia is seeing that they aren't seeing, right? Or that they're not perceiving to some degree. But at the same time, I guess that initial setting that they give you, right, at the beginning of the movie indicates that this world exists. And they kind of put that setting out there and say, this is the world, blah, blah, blah. And us as an audience, especially for me as a first-time viewer, watched it and goes, oh, okay.
Yep.
In this hypothetical world, we are led to believe and are supposed to assume that this world actually exists.
Yes.
I wasn't really given much of a reason, I guess, but specifically to believe that it did not exist at all, actually. And it was simply a perception of her imagination. Other than that scene, and maybe you could argue the very end, but as compared to, let's just say, The Sixth Sense, which plays into this idea of there is this a reality and then perception shifts. It
clearly has an effect because, well, I mean, also in arguing with The Sixth Sense, or as The Sixth Sense does, the what could have been not real is proven to be real based off of the fact that there are literal real life relations that it shows that there's no way he could have known if he didn't have this sixth sense. And in this movie, we do have something like that with the Mandrake, because she started getting better.
Yes.
She started getting better until they burned the Mandrake.
Yeah, which I thought that was an interesting piece because of
a little bit of a tease of like there's 100% evidence that it's real.
And it also harkens back to like old historical understandings. Even you see that in the Bible where it talks about Jacob and his two wives, and one of them hires the husband for the evening using mandrakes, right? So it's like this idea of fertility and the health of women being tied to mandrakes is a old tradition.
I love them throwing that in there. It's just a nice little nod to it, because we can look at the literal interpretations with mandrake, and then we can look at the more figurative ones, and this one uses both, and I love it.
So anyways, there's so much going on. I didn't want to get too caught up in the A plot, B plot. Suffice it to say, Patrick did not answer my question, which doesn't give me clarity, but I respect it because he has a nuanced view.
Answer this one, and that's the thing is, I technically did, but there's two ways you can go about it, and that ultimately is in how you interpret the film to be, which I love when a film does that. Except when I'm given a hard, hey, what's the answer to this?
Except for when I'm asking you this question.
Except from when you're asking me the question that many people are like, that doesn't work. And if I recall, Del Toro thinks it works the same way with that. But
you mean like he intentionally put that in so you don't understand?
So you don't know the difference. But that plays into also looking at the film from the perspective of Ofelia. So I guess my answer is that because Ofelia is our unreliable narrator, but is our narrator regardless, I'm going to say plot A, the fantasy plot, is the main plot.
Sure.
Ultimately, she handles plot B as a sort of bobbing and weaving through it.
Right.
But plot A is her escape from it. And that's her whole point of going through plot A, is to escape it.